Okay, welcome back everybody. Last session for today. Last submitter, but certainly not the least. Rahiri Taonga, Heritage New Zealand, welcome. You're going to nicely weave into the previous submitter, I'm assuming. We're here to discuss matters relating to treaty grounds, Waitangi Estates Limited. So, Mr. Bracey, we're in your hands. You've got another person with you.
Yes, well, introduce yourself. This is Bill.
Bill, please. Bill Edwards.
Bill Edwards, yep.
Got a Bill? And are you from?
Yes, he's the area manager. For
you're the area manager. Welcome. Do you want to present evidence, or you're here for quick?
I'll just give a little clips. That's okay.
No problem. We're in your hands.
So we don't want to present or refer to our rebuttal. We've heard the discussion this afternoon. But anyway, thank you very much for having us here again. We also would like to make it clear that we really enjoyed working with the country staff and the opportunity with Waitangi National Trust to try and work this through. We started in this process, Heritage New Zealand, launching a submission because a lot of us were very surprised that Waitangi had nothing special on it in the district plan. It has got our heritage listing. But apart from that, you could, as someone said, do maize underneath the flag behind it, as teeth, because it's rural production. A lot of our organisation is very surprised. So we came in with a submission asking for a heritage area over the treaty grounds, as to reflect the other heritage areas that are in Paihia, Russell, other areas as well. And that was what we had started out doing. Then Rochelle started talking to us with the National Trust, and we just thought that this probably was the ideal outcome. It's a special zone, it's a special place, it's got special significance, and it should be treated like a special zone in its own right. So we have come along to all that. We still hold that submission about heritage area. I think, Bill, you have said from all our submissions on the plan, this is number one for us. It's getting this sorted. That's one thing. And we will talk about that briefly, about some of why it's so significant. But Bill, do you want to talk to that now?
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Bill Edwards tōku ingoa. Look, I'd just like to say thank you all for this chance to talk, and thank you for listening. And also, as I'll just reiterate that it's been very nice to be working with both the Council and Waitangi on this, because I think that really Waitangi is both locally, nationally and internationally significant, and that's been reflected by the people that have been talking about this place. And I think that it's not reflected in the district plan. And so we want to reflect that special place, a special zone of Waitangi in the district plan. We also want to ensure that Waitangi can continue to thrive economically, as well as culturally, and as well as historically. And the way to do that, we believe, is through the special zone plan. A healthy Waitangi is a healthy community. I think that some of the debates about, signage and special about areas of whether it's temporary activity or whatever it is, while they're important, they appear to be distracting ourselves from really what the core thing is. And the core thing is this is a very, very important place, and we need to look after it for future generations. And therefore, I see that this is a good way to go about it. Good.
Now, as a planner, I'll just go and address some of the planning things now from our point of view. We work, and I think it has been explained very closely at the Waitangi National Trust. I think I have counted up since I have been here this year 10 projects that we have consulted before launchment of any resource consents. So we have met on site and looked at what was proposed and suggested changes or whatever. Required authorisation where appropriate. And if you look at a pure cost point of view, all of those required resource consents, I reckon it's about $5,000 a resource consent application here now. And it's $50,000 for the National Trust to come up with if you were to go to keep having to get resource consents for all those type of activities. There's the telecommunication tower that is in lodged for consent. The GB shelter, there is the refurbished bowling club, which is kind of being used for educational facilities now. There's the new roof on the visitor centre, wasn't it? Yep, the new roof. New workshop. All these at the moment trigger resource consent. And from our point of view, there is a robust process in place to protect the reason this is so special, which is the heritage and cultural values already in play between the parties. It is a high trust model, no doubt about it, and it does rely on trust and respect between the parties. And so far, and Bill's been around longer than me, 14 years around up here, it has worked. This is one of the most unique sites with the background to it, with the deed under legislation, with historic New Zealand Heritage New Zealand Act for the listings and for the archaeological process. It is now one of 2 national landmarks in New Zealand. The second one just being announced was the National War Memorial at Wellington, which has just been announced as the second national landmark. It is interesting is, yes, it is interesting with the discussion from Ben about financing or funding, the taxpayer pays next to nothing for the national site for this national site. It puts next to nothing into Wellington. Therefore, you have to see the treaty grounds and the associated farmland and other activities as one, because you need those other activities to generate the income to look after, because that's the way it's set up. It is not crown funded, rightly or wrong. With the archaeology, we think there is an insufficient process in place with our Act, and Bill can talk to recent surveys that have been done, and what we usually require when we get some of these projects.
Kia ora, thank you. I'd just like to thank Dr. Andrew Brown for his comments too. They were very, as an archaeologist myself, I agree with what Dr. Brown was saying. Basically, the archaeological significance of the site is huge, and it's not all fully understood, and more work needs to take place. The idea of what tends to happen as things get done in a fashion where this work is done and that work is done. So you get a piecemeal approach to the archaeological significance of the whole things. And I think, having a really long an archaeological plan is a very good idea. I don't think it needs to be part of the legal consent district planning process. I think that's a separate process, but I'd just like to reiterate, I think that's a good idea, but I don't think it's within the
We're looking at the planning management of it. I'm going to be a bit old school. I can pick up on a bit of what Commissioner Watson said. When the RMA started out, it was an enabling legislation that dealt with adverse effects. I'm struggling to hear what adverse effects that the council gets complaints about, for example, that are generated at Waitangi. Now, there was offsite, when there's a new shipyard, there's offsite traffic management there. But within the site, what are people complaining about that they are affected by? I think 2 signs is a bit ridiculous. I know that there's some exemptions for heritage, but I was counting for the treaty house at the moment. We have 5 signs just for the treaty house, and that is made up of wayfinding, health and safety, storyboards, storytelling, and memorials, all around the treaty house. So that's 5 just for that one building. That does not include the meeting house, the paper hole, or anything else. So if we start putting these numbers on, are we actually controlling anything that needs to be controlled? Because who is adversely affected? None of those signs can be put up without the parties who manage the site agree. And there won't be any on site. There simply won't be. Even Cockthorne in the new rules proposed through the National Trust Council, neon signs up. So I'm just wondering, as a planner, what are we trying to control? What is the adverse effect that people have been telling the council that there is a problem with Waitangi? Traffic management for the treaty, for the Waitangi region, yeah, that's another issue. When it comes to activities on the site, the activities are being proposed to raise money or for cultural reasons or for heritage reasons. But a lot of the activities are to raise money to look after the heritage features. So there's a direct relationship there. And again, are the activities creating adverse effects that need to be controlled by council? Other than out on the road boundaries, and there are only two little, there's the top road boundary and the little bottom bit by the bridge. Because the road going through that site is not a public road. So there can be no complaints from people about signage from the road that goes up to the golf course. It's not a public road. When we start looking at things like wanting 30 square metre buildings without going through resource consents, we are using, for example, I'm not saying we would use these here, but we're using containers as temporary offices, temporary storage areas a lot now, especially in times of flood and things like this, when you have to get things to places quickly. A container is about 15 square metres of floor area. So again, what is the adverse effect we're trying to control with that kind of floor area? Excuse me for that. When we look at the activities from what we've heard today, I wonder whether we can look at a definition of activities for Waitangi. In the special zone, because it is a special zone, these are the type of activities you can expect. There's still the noise controls, sign controls out in the public viewing areas, but not much more control than that within the site. Then you can use the general temporary activities for anything else that might come up that doesn't fit that definition. It fits that temporary activity, fine. If it doesn't, it becomes non-compliant and it goes through that process. But within Waitangi, I just wonder whether we are thinking of things to control that don't need to be controlled.
Have you put that to the submitter, to Waitangi Limited?
We have talked about it in
Ms.
general.
Jacobs?
We have talked about it in general, and certainly our view has, by just what we've listened today, so we would talk about it a bit more with them. But that is my planning view from what I've heard today. And it would still fit within what Heritage New Zealand wants to try and achieve. Because we'd still be a part, through another process, a party that is the checks and balances.
So what we hear from you is that Heritage New Zealand is enthusiastically supportive of this special purpose zone.
Yeah. With limited internal restrictions.
Yeah, and in terms, you've obviously had a good look at the provisions and had some input into them. So which version of the provisions do you support? Well, is it the latest version?
The latest version, but I think we need to look at the activities and temporary activities as to how that works.
Yes.
Because I think we're trying to force a round peg into a square hole a little bit here. By trying to create these numbers for days of temporary activities and things like this, when these activities are just part of that special site.
So what you're saying is that the submitter could suggest a list of activities
that define what Waitangi happens at Waitangi.
The word is plastic. I think we're looking for a plastic framework.
Flexible?
flexible. Yeah, I think plastic.
Yeah. Flexible, I think so.
We're supposed to be against plastic.
Yes. And certainly, as Bill said, we're quite open, and there has been some initial discussion about the archaeological management plans, but outside of this process between us and the National Trust. There is a conservation plan for Waitangi for the treaty house area.
It seems to me that there are a number of plans that are required that should be there.
Yeah, there is one for Waitangi now, for just the treaty house area there.
Tourism management.
Yeah.
Traffic management. plan,
Yeah. Economic
conservation
management.
plan, archaeological, and it seems to me none of those, well, I'm yet to be convinced that any of those need to be part of the special purpose zone.
It could be referred to in a note as
I
outside.
know, difference to the council officers, I'm not evaluating those things, it's whether it needs to be in a zoning. Post.
I think that's big outside of that.
Yeah.
And I think the argument about the non-compliant activity generated because of planning landscape is an example of where a planning control is actually achieving. When the landscape planning value is the heritage value that has a number of checks and balances. So whether we can think of it differently for this special zone, it doesn't apply anywhere else.
Yeah, it just reminds me that I meant to ask that question of Ms. Epsilon. Mr. Cocker was here. Would you indulge me? Because you've raised it.
Yeah.
Do you have a view as to whether the treaty grounds are primarily a outstanding natural landscape because of heritage?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, it seems to me that
No question at all.
Yeah, everyone's agreed.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, thank you. Let's clarify that matter.
Yeah. And we also are aware that of the cultural events and other dignitary events, a lot of work starts at 4, 5, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And so the 6 o'clock is a bit, I know we've asked for 5. I know, sorry, the National Trust is up for 5.
I think that we think that argument's been very well put. Because of the circumstances that apply.
Yeah. This site, as far as we're concerned, is very important for education as well. So for people understanding why it's important, understanding what is there. And as Bill was alluding to, we don't know archaeologically what is still all there yet. And he recently did a survey, found a number of new stuff, including garden walls and things, and including where the British camp.
I recall you presented evidence.
Yes, right. Yeah, sorry.
Previously, no, I'm not
Yeah,
trying
so-
to shut you down, but I just want to remind myself that I presented
That's
a
right.
whole
Whole lot of stuff that
European
was found.
gardens,
Yeah.
yes, that had been overgrown and.
Totally.
That's correct. Yes. So it's full of surprises.
Yes. And we would certainly see and hope to work with the trust that we would get yearly surveys to keep looking at the site. And you can imagine you can get students coming up from Auckland helping on that kind of thing from the universities. There is that opportunity in the wider site to do that. There are still, for example, we are still do have the control about the earthworks. And as was mentioned, the latest to remove a hedge right by the treaty house, between the treaty house and the meeting house. And as soon as you disturb the soil there, we want an authority because anything would be quite shallow, archaeological would be quite shallow. And so any digging, even for a hedge, and turn up some very interesting stuff. So that is required an authority. And Waitangi National Trust say, yeah, that's fine. In the process that we do. So we've certainly come to the view that special zone is the way to go, other than the heritage area that we originally proposed. We think we need to think carefully what adverse effects the plan is trying to control. We think there is, with this site, there are a uniquely several other checks and balances that other sites don't have. We are very aware that the National Trust has to raise income to maintain the treaty house, the museum, the visitor centre, the flagpole, the grounds. They have to raise income. And what we should be trying to control rather than size, things like that, is the adverse effects, the noise, visual from public viewing areas. The waterways, make sure sewage isn't up directly down, all those kind of things. Control, they're all internal rather than external adverse effects. Right.
I think if we have a healthy, functioning, vibrant Waitangi, it reflects well on us as a district. And I think that this special zone would go a long way to helping that.
So I have been answering the questions, but yeah, we just think we could create something quite special.
Well, thank you very much. It's helpful evidence. Do you have any questions?
I do have a question that's more a point of clarification, and I'll probably seek it from our officers as well. In your evidence, you note that the site being significantly sacred and an ancestral landscape for Ngāpuhi. I did ask a question previously about being regionally significant infrastructure, cultural infrastructure is what I'm referring to. Because from what I'm aware, it's a significant sacred and ancestral site for Muri Whenua as well, not just for Ngāpuhi.
And I do Hara, we would, she's the expert. So I agree that it's wider as well, not just now.
She spoke about all of Te Tai Tokerau, so all of Northland as a whole.
Yeah.
I think around the temporary events, that's where sort of that question was, because talking about cultural events and the site being significant regionally,
Yeah.
not just for Ngāpuhi, but for Muri Whenua, for all of Te Tai Tokerau, to not have any constraints about holding those culturally significant events, which also, as you highlight in your evidence, also could potentially be political as well as cultural events, which has always historically been a place to discuss those items of contention.
But you still have those general controls about noise levels, traffic management, signage that can be seen from public roads. So you still got those, regardless of all that, those activities going on. You still have the general ones, but you don't need the internal ones.
No, that was all just clarifying your support of that.
Yes,
that
yes,
sort of
definitely.
methodology.
Totally.
Yeah, no, I've got no further questions too. I've read your evidence and thank you very much for sitting in on the previous. Yeah, that's right, and then being able to update your evidence with regards to what you heard. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit more work in this space.
I don't think the staff have got any questions or pass them.
I'll see in a minute.
Okay, sorry.
What was I going to say? Look, I think there's obviously going to be a bit more work to be done, and I think this is how these special purpose zone requests are going. All I wanted to say is that we hope that you're going to be part of that if there's going to be any ongoing.
We'll continue to work with.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've made an interesting recommendation. I think, you should now work with Ms. Jacobs and her client to see if that becomes a thing. Because at the end of the day, it's Waitangi Limited's request. And so we're trying to help you make that request a thing that resolves all issues. So, any questions or clarification for this witness, councillor?
Me? I think.
No.
Too late.
No, 4:43, I think.
Fewer questions as the day goes on. There's fewer questions.
Yeah, that's right. You've been in the game long enough.
Some of that questions I just shut.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you very much. Look, thank you very much. It's been a very, yeah. Right, James, do you want to address us, Mr. Willow, perhaps?
Yeah. Yes, look, I think it's clear that there's no support for council's position on a lot of these matters. So I perhaps maybe walk back some of the earlier comments. We've put our position that doesn't appear to be getting any traction, sir. So in terms of your consideration, yeah, we won't. I'll probably walk that back around to getting together. We're showing direction.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, thank you again. Thank you. Thanks again, everybody. We'll close with a clap here.
Po hirihiri, po ramarama, po o te whakaro, po o te tangata, po o te aroha. Ti po I hiri nei I a tātou, mauri ora ki a tātou, haumie, hui, tātou. Thank you, and I will stop the recording.